I hauled the last of our gear up the steep incline, sweat trickling down my back despite the cool forest air. Jenny was several paces ahead, her auburn hair catching glints of sunlight filtering through the dense canopy. 3 hours of hiking had left my legs burning, but the moment we broke through into the clearing, I knew we'd found our spot. "This is perfect," Jenny called back, already shrugging off her backpack. The clearing stretched about 30 yards across, bordered by pine and cedar trees, whose branches swayed gently in the breeze. A small river cut through the western edge, its clear water bubbling over smooth stones. Enough open space for our tents, enough tree cover for shelter, enough distance from the marked trails to feel like we had the forest to ourselves. Ron emerged from the tree line behind me, his copper-red beard dotted with sweat. "Damn, Mike. When you said you found a good spot, you weren't kidding." He dropped his pack with a theatrical groan. "Tell me again why we didn't just drive to a campground with parking." "Because that wouldn't be camping," I said, rolling my shoulders to ease the strain. "That would be parking your car near your tent." Lisa appeared last, looking remarkably put together despite the hike. Her long braid had barely come undone, and she didn't have the same disheveled appearance the rest of us shared. "It's beautiful," she said, her amber eyes scanning the clearing. "The river's perfect for cooling our drinks." We spent the next hour setting up camp. Jenny and I worked in our familiar rhythm, staking out our 3-person tent, while Ron and Lisa bickered over the proper way to secure their rainfly. The easy domesticity of the moment made me smile, watching my wife of 5 years methodically organizing our sleeping bags while our friends' voices rose and fell in the background. "Ron, you need to secure it from this corner first," Lisa insisted, gesturing with the tent stake. "I've been camping since I was a kid," Ron countered. "Let me handle this." And yet somehow we ended up with a flooded tent last time. I caught Jenny's eye and we shared a silent laugh. Their marriage existed in a perpetual state of passionate disagreement followed by equally passionate reconciliation. Different from our steady partnership, but it seemed to work for them. Jenny laid her hand on my arm. "I'm going to gather kindling for the fire." "I'll get the big stuff," I offered. The afternoon passed in the pleasant rhythm of campsite preparation. Ron and I hauled fallen branches from the forest edge, while Jenny arranged stones for a fire pit. Lisa unpacked the cooking gear, lining up our portable stove and supplies with methodical precision. By the time dusk approached, we had a crackling fire going and dinner preparations underway. I found myself relaxing for the first time in weeks. The consulting job I'd been wrestling with seemed a world away now, replaced by the simple tasks of wilderness survival. "We should check out Carson Ridge tomorrow," Ron said, stirring a pot of chili that smelled good enough to make my stomach growl in anticipation. "There's a viewpoint about 4 miles north that's supposed to be incredible." Jenny looked up from slicing an apple. "I read about that in the trail guide. It overlooks the entire valley, right?" "That's the one." Ron nodded, but as he spoke, his eyes flicked toward the darkening forest beyond our clearing. It was quick, just a momentary glance, but I noticed the way his shoulders tensed. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Yeah, just thought I saw something move." Ron waved dismissively. "Probably a deer or something." I followed his gaze, but saw nothing beyond the wall of trees, now turning into indistinct shadows as the sun sank lower. "This area's packed with wildlife," Ron continued, a little too enthusiastically. "My buddy who recommended this spot said he saw black bears, deer, even a mountain lion once." Lisa shot him a sharp look. "You didn't mention mountain lions before." "They're more scared of us than we are of them," I said, though I found myself scanning the tree line as well. Dinner conversation drifted between plans for tomorrow's hike, work stories, and Ron's increasingly elaborate ghost stories as the fire burned down to embers. The night grew darker around us, the forest transforming into a wall of impenetrable black beyond the firelight. "They say these woods are some of the oldest in the Pacific Northwest," Ron said, his voice dropping dramatically as he poked at the fire. sending sparks spiraling upward. Native legends talk about spirits that lived here long before people arrived, tricksters that could change their appearance. Jenny rolled her eyes. Are you really trying to scare us with campfire stories? Just sharing the local color, Ron grinned. But again, his eyes darted toward the darkness. As we packed up the remnants of dinner, I noticed Ron doing it again, glancing nervously into the forest, his movements becoming more hurried as night fully settled around us. When I caught him looking a third time, I decided to call him on it. You keep looking into the woods. What's up? Nothing. Ron shrugged. Just watching for wildlife. Thought I heard something moving around earlier. I didn't entirely believe him, but let it drop. The cool night air had brought a chill, and the warmth of our tent beckoned. One by one, we doused the fire and retreated to our respective shelters. Jenny and I zipped ourselves into our sleeping bags, the thin fabric of the tent our only separation from the wilderness. I love you, Jenny murmured, already half asleep against my shoulder. Love you too, I whispered back, listening to her breathing deepen. Sleep came quickly after the exertion of the day, but it didn't last. I jolted awake sometime deep in the night, unsure what had disturbed me. The inside of the tent was pitch black. Jenny slept soundly beside me, her breathing soft and regular. Then I heard it, hushed voices from across the clearing. Ron and Lisa's tent. Their whispers carried just enough for me to know they were arguing, but not clearly enough to make out words. Lisa's voice rose briefly before dropping again, urgent and intense. Ron's responses were shorter, clipped. I tried to ignore them, turning over in my sleeping bag. Couples fight, I told myself. None of my business. Sleep reclaimed me, but brought unsettling dreams. Shadowy figures moving between trees, eyes reflecting moonlight that shouldn't have been there. In the dream logic of sleep, I felt watched, studied by something patient and hungry. I woke again, pulse racing to absolute silence. No whispers now, no night birds, not even the rustle of wind through leaves. The stillness felt wrong, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. A soft sound broke the silence, something between a sob and a laugh, distant but clear. I strained to listen, wondering if I'd imagined it. Then it came again, a childlike giggle that raised the hair on my arms. Jenny, I whispered, but she didn't stir. The sound came a third time, closer now. I unzipped the sleeping bag and fumbled for the flashlight beside me. My hand shook slightly as I reached for the tent zipper. Before I could open it, movement outside cast a shadow against the fabric. A human silhouette outlined against what must have been moonlight. It stood perfectly still, directly in front of our tent. Who's there? I called, my voice cracking slightly. The figure didn't respond, but I could have sworn it tilted its head, an unnaturally angled movement that sent a chill through me. I reached over to wake Jenny, but my hand found her shoulder, warm and solid beside me. I turned to look at her sleeping form, confused by the shadow outside. When I looked back, the silhouette was gone. My heart pounded as I unzipped the tent and peered out. The clearing was empty, bathed in patchy moonlight filtering through the trees. Ron and Lisa's tent stood silent across the way. Nothing moved. I zipped the tent closed and lay back down, telling myself it had been a tree branch or my imagination. But sleep remained elusive, and when it did come, it brought more fragmented dreams of watching eyes and figures that moved with jerky wrong motions at the periphery of my vision. The final time I woke, dim pre-dawn light filtered through the tent fabric. Jenny was sound asleep beside me, one arm thrown across her face. I felt exhausted, gritty-eyed from the interrupted night. Had I really seen someone outside our tent? Heard that strange laughter? Or had Ron's ghost stories just wormed their way into my subconscious, turning normal forest sounds into something sinister? I rubbed my face, feeling the stubble under my palms. Probably just bad dreams. That had to be it. ghost stories and strange forests and unfamiliar sounds combining into nightmares. But as I lay there waiting for full daylight, I couldn't shake the memory of that figure outside our tent, or the disturbing fact that for just a moment, I thought it had been Jenny standing there, watching me sleep, while she lay beside me the entire time. I climbed out of the tent, muscles stiff from a night of interrupted sleep and unsettling dreams. Jenny still slumbered peacefully, unaware of the strange experiences that had kept me awake. The image of that silhouette outside our tent, a shadow that had seemed disturbingly like Jenny even while she lay beside me, lingered in my thoughts. The camp came slowly to life around me. I busied myself preparing the portable stove for coffee, trying to shake off the remnants of those disturbing dreams. Maybe daylight would restore some sense of normalcy. Ron emerged from his tent looking haggard, his normally meticulously wild beard disheveled in a way that suggested genuine lack of care rather than calculated ruggedness. He nodded at me without his usual morning banter. "Rough night?" I asked, filling the coffee pot with water from our jug. "You could say that." He dropped onto the log we'd positioned as seating near the fire pit, rubbing his face with both hands. "Weird dreams." Something in his tone made me pause. "What kind of dreams?" He shrugged, suddenly evasive. "Just weird forest shit. Nothing specific." Jenny joined us before I could press further, her hair tangled in what she called her tent bedhead. She squeezed my shoulder as she passed, heading straight for the coffee that had just begun to percolate. "Morning, wilderness warriors," she said, stifling a yawn. Lisa appeared last, her normally perfect braid replaced by a hasty ponytail. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and she winced when Jenny accidentally knocked a metal cup against the stove. We ate breakfast in unusual silence. Ron pushed his instant oatmeal around more than eating it, while Lisa picked at a granola bar with the enthusiasm of someone contemplating medicine. The comfortable rhythm we'd established yesterday had vanished, replaced by a strained awkwardness none of us acknowledged. Halfway through his coffee, Ron set down his cup with sudden decision. "I'm going to take a hike. Solo. Clear my head a bit." Jenny looked up from her oatmeal. "We should probably stick together. Safety in numbers and all that. It's just a short walk." Ron's tone carried a defensive edge I wasn't used to hearing from him. "I need some air, some space to think." "You're literally surrounded by air and space," I pointed out. Ron stood, already reaching for his day pack. "An hour, tops. I'll stick to the trail we came in on." "Ron," Jenny started. "I said I'm going." His voice had a sharp finality to it. Without another word, he slung his pack over one shoulder and stalked off between the trees, not even bothering to properly secure it. Jenny and I exchanged concerned glances. "That was weird," she murmured. Lisa massaged her temples, eyes closed. "He just needs to walk it off. We had an argument last night." That explained the whispered fight I'd overheard from their tent. "Are you okay?" Jenny asked her, genuine concern softening her voice. "Migraine starting." Lisa gestured vaguely toward her head. "I get them sometimes when I'm stressed." We finished breakfast and cleaned up the campsite in subdued quiet. Jenny suggested a short walk to the river to refill our water containers. I welcomed the brief escape from the tension at camp, especially with Lisa retreating to her tent with a bottle of pain relievers. "What do you think that was about?" Jenny asked once we were out of earshot, kneeling beside the clear water. I dipped the first bottle into the current. "Don't know, but something feels off. Ron was acting strange this morning." "They fight all the time," Jenny reasoned, but I could hear uncertainty in her voice. "Yeah, but this seems different." We spent the next 40 minutes avoiding camp, mapping a small section of the riverbank and identifying plants Jenny wanted to photograph later. When we returned, Lisa was still in her tent, and no sign of Ron. "Should we be worried?" Jenny checked her watch. "It's been over an hour." I shook my head, though a small knot of concern had formed in my stomach. He knows these woods. Probably just lost track of time. 20 minutes later, the sound of breaking branches announced Ron's return. He emerged from the trees with an entirely different energy than when he'd left. Shoulders back, steps quick and purposeful, eyes bright with excitement. "Guys, you won't believe what I found!" He dropped his pack and gestured emphatically toward the north. "There's an abandoned farmhouse about a mile that way. 2 stories, weathered wood, collapsed barn, the whole creepy abandoned property package." I frowned, mentally reviewing the topographical maps I'd studied before our trip. "That's not possible." "What do you mean, not possible?" Ron laughed, but something about the sound seemed forced. "I just saw it. I researched this area extensively before we came," I explained. "There are no structures marked on any maps within 5 miles of this location." Jenny nodded beside me. "Plus, we scouted north yesterday for almost 2 miles when we were looking for kindling. There was nothing but forest." Ron's smile faltered for a split second before returning with doubled intensity. "Well, it's there. Must be really old, unmarked on maps. Real ghost town material." The tent behind us rustled as Lisa emerged, looking remarkably recovered from her migraine. "Oh, you found the farmhouse?" My attention snapped to her. "You knew about it?" "We spotted it from that ridge yesterday," Lisa said casually, joining our circle. "It looked interesting, but we didn't mention it because it seemed too far off trail." I stared at her, alarm bells ringing in my head. Jenny and I had been with them the entire time on that ridge. There had been no farmhouse, and neither Ron nor Lisa had mentioned seeing anything unusual. Ron clapped his hands together. "We should check it out after lunch. The place is amazing, like stepping back in time." Jenny caught my eye, her expression mirroring my unease. "Let's eat first and talk about it," she suggested diplomatically. As we prepared lunch, I watched Ron closely. Something about him seemed subtly wrong. His movements were too deliberate, as if he had to think about each action before performing it. His speech patterns had shifted. The casual contractions and slang he typically used were replaced by more formal constructions. When he passed me the camp stove, his fingers curled around it in a way that looked almost experimental, like someone mimicking how they'd seen others handle objects. I set up the portable burner while Jenny chopped vegetables for our stir-fry. Ron disappeared behind their tent with Lisa in tow, their voices drifting over in harsh whispers that abruptly cut off when I moved closer to collect more cooking supplies. "I can't just change the story," Lisa's voice hissed. "Exactly as we discussed," Ron responded, his tone carrying an unfamiliar cadence. "They're noticing." They fell silent as I approached. When they rejoined us for lunch, their smiles seemed plastered on, a performance of normalcy that made my skin crawl. "So?" Ron said while we ate. "The farmhouse. We should head out in about an hour. Plenty of time to explore before dark." Jenny raised her eyebrows at me across the camp stove. "I'm not sure we should be exploring abandoned buildings in the middle of nowhere." Ron waved his fork dismissively. "It's perfectly safe. I checked it out. Floors are solid." Lisa set down her plate, half-eaten. "Actually, I think I'll stay here. My headache might come back if I hike." Ron turned to her, something flashing in his eyes that looked almost like anger. "But you just said, 'I need to rest,'" she interrupted firmly. "You 3 go ahead." The inconsistency hung in the air between us. First, she confirmed seeing a farmhouse that couldn't possibly exist. Then, she declined to visit it. My unease deepened. After lunch, we packed day bags with water, snacks, and first aid supplies. Jenny insisted on bringing flashlights, just in case, though Ron assured us we'd be back well before dusk. Lisa retreated to her tent again as we prepared to leave. Ron led us into the forest with unnerving confidence, taking turns without hesitation, even as the terrain became increasingly unfamiliar. The trails disappeared, replaced by dense underbrush that caught at our ankles. Several times I checked my compass, confirming we were heading north, but noting how Ron never once hesitated at a fork or checked for landmarks. "This doesn't feel like a mile," Jenny murmured after we'd been hiking for nearly 40 minutes. I nodded, keeping my voice low. And this area wasn't on any of the trail maps. Maybe it's just unmapped, she suggested, but her expression told me she didn't believe it. I slowed my pace slightly, creating distance between us and Ron. When he was far enough ahead, I caught Jenny's arm gently, pulling her closer. "Something's wrong with him," I whispered urgently. "He's acting different, moving different, talking different." I noticed. She squeezed my hand, her fingers cold despite the exertion of our hike. And that story about the farmhouse? We were literally in this area yesterday. Lisa's behavior is bizarre, too. First confirming a building she couldn't have seen, then suddenly deciding not to come. Jenny's grip on my hand tightened. "Mike, what the hell is going on with our friends?" "I don't know," I admitted, "but we need to be careful." Ron's voice called from ahead, impatient. "Keep up, guys. It's not much farther." We pushed forward through increasingly dense forest, following Ron's unnaturally confident lead. A heavy sense of wrongness settled over me with each step. The forest felt different here, older somehow, the trees growing too close together, branches intertwining overhead to block much of the sky. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being led somewhere we were never meant to find. Trees clawed at my sleeves as we followed Ron deeper into the forest. What had started as a mild hike had devolved into an exhausting trek through increasingly dense undergrowth. The forest grew more oppressive with each step, branches tangling overhead to block out most of the sky. My watch told me we'd been walking for nearly 2 hours. "Ron," I called ahead, stepping over a fallen log. "You said this place was only a mile away." He paused without turning around. Did I? Must have misjudged the distance. The casual dismissal didn't match Ron's usual defensive response to being corrected. Another small piece in the growing puzzle of wrongness. Jenny squeezed my hand, her palm clammy against mine despite the cool air. I could feel her tension mirroring my own. We'd ventured far beyond anywhere we'd explored yesterday, moving into territory that shouldn't contain any structures according to every map I'd studied. "We should head back," Jenny suggested, her voice low. "It'll be getting dark in a few hours." Ron turned then, his smile too wide and stiff. "It's just ahead, trust me. You don't want to miss this." Before I could argue, the trees abruptly gave way. We stepped into a clearing where afternoon sunlight illuminated what should have been impossible. A 2-story farmhouse exactly as Ron had described, complete with weathered clapboard siding, a sagging front porch, and several broken windows on the upper floor. A collapsed barn lay about 50 yards behind it, its roof caved in and walls listing dangerously. My stomach dropped. This building couldn't exist here. I'd pored over topographical maps for weeks before our trip. No structures were marked anywhere near our campsite. "There. See?" Ron gestured triumphantly. "Told you it was worth the hike." Jenny's grip on my hand tightened painfully. "Mike," she whispered, "this isn't possible." "I know," I muttered back, unable to tear my eyes from the building. It looked decades old, yet somehow untouched by the forest that should have reclaimed it years ago. No vines crawled up its walls, no saplings pushed through its porch. The clearing around it was oddly distinct, as if some invisible boundary prevented the forest from encroaching. Ron was already striding toward the house, his movements oddly fluid. "Come on, let's check it out." I held Jenny back for a moment. "We shouldn't go in there." "I know," she said, "but we can't let him go alone. Whatever's happening with Ron, I'm worried about him." She was right. Despite my every instinct screaming to grab Jenny and run back to camp, we couldn't abandon our friend, even if he wasn't acting like himself. We followed Ron up the creaking porch steps, boards groaning under our weight. The front door hung partially open, its paint peeling in long strips. Ron pushed it wider without hesitation and stepped inside. After exchanging a final look of apprehension, Jenny and I followed. The interior was dim, dust motes dancing in beams of light that filtered through grimy windows. The entryway opened to a living room on the right and what appeared to be a dining room on the left. A staircase directly ahead climbed to the second floor, several steps, visibly rotted. "Amazing preservation," Ron commented, running his fingers along a dusty sideboard, like stepping back in time. I studied our surroundings with growing unease. The place had all the hallmarks of long abandonment. A thick layer of dust covered every surface. The wallpaper was peeling. Water stains marred the ceiling. But something felt staged about it all. Despite the apparent age, I noticed a strange absence of cobwebs in the corners. No animal droppings on the floors, no leaves or debris that should have blown in through the broken windows. "Mike," Jenny called from the living room. She stood beside furniture draped in yellowed sheets. "Look at this." I joined her, noting how the sheet-covered shapes suggested a sofa, 2 armchairs, and what might be a piano in the corner. Nothing unusual for an abandoned house. "What am I looking at?" She gestured toward a coffee table. "The dust." I leaned closer and saw what had caught her attention. While dust covered most surfaces, there were clear patches on the table, rectangular outlines where objects had recently sat. "Someone's been here," I murmured. Ron appeared in the doorway. "I'm going to check out the kitchen. This place is incredible." His enthusiasm felt grotesque in the oppressive stillness of the house. Before I could stop him, he disappeared down a hallway, his footsteps oddly muffled on the wooden floors. Jenny and I moved through the living room cautiously. I lifted one of the sheets, revealing a faded floral sofa that looked straight out of the 1950s. No mold, no mouse nests, no deterioration beyond some fading. Impossible for fabric left unprotected for decades. "Mike," Jenny's voice wavered. She stood by a small side table holding something between her fingers. Cigarette butts, fresh ones. My chest tightened as I moved to her side. 3 cigarette butts sat in a glass ashtray, the ash still intact, not yet scattered by time or wind, not decades old, days at most. "We need to find Ron and get out of here," I said, scanning the room for anything else out of place. We made our way to the kitchen where we found Ron opening cupboards with childlike curiosity. The room contained rusted pots and pans hanging from hooks, an ancient refrigerator with its door propped open and interior empty, and a cast-iron stove covered in decades of grime. "Ron, someone's been here recently," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "We should go." He turned, head tilting at an angle that sent another jolt of wrongness through me. "But we haven't seen everything yet. There's a basement." He pointed to a door beside the pantry. "And upstairs. We could split up, cover more ground. I'll check the basement if you two want to look upstairs." "We're not splitting up," Jenny said immediately. Ron's expression flickered. Not disappointment or annoyance, but something closer to calculation. "Fine. Upstairs first, then the basement together." Against every instinct, we followed Ron back to the entry hall and up the creaking staircase. I tested each step before allowing Jenny to put her weight on it, hyper-aware of the aged wood. The second floor contained a narrow hallway with 4 doors, 2 on each side. "Bedrooms, probably," Ron said, pushing open the first door on the left. A musty smell wafted out from a room containing an iron bed frame with a bare, stained mattress. A dresser missing several drawers stood against one wall beneath a cracked mirror. Nothing unusual for an abandoned farmhouse, except for the continued absence of animal evidence. As Jenny and I examined the room, a loud slam echoed through the house. We rushed into the hallway to find Ron gone. "Ron?" I called out, moving quickly toward the stairs. No response. We hurried back downstairs, calling his name. The basement door that had been closed earlier now stood open, revealing darkness below. "Ron, are you down there?" Jenny's voice echoed into the blackness. Silence. I pulled my flashlight from my backpack and shone it down the wooden steps. "Ron, if you're trying to scare us, it's not funny." Nothing. I'm going down, I decided, clicking the flashlight to its brightest setting. Jenny grabbed my arm. I'm coming with you. We descended cautiously, the wooden steps groaning under our weight. The basement was a single open room with a dirt floor and stone foundation walls. My flashlight beam cut through the darkness, revealing rusted tools hanging on walls, shelves lined with ancient preserve jars, and a workbench covered in dusty equipment. But no Ron. He has to be here somewhere, Jenny whispered, her voice tight with fear. We searched every corner of the basement, finding no other doors or exits, no sign of where Ron could have gone. When we returned to the stairs, a cold draft rushed past us from above. Let's check upstairs again, I suggested, though dread pooled in my stomach. We climbed back to the main floor, only to find the basement door now firmly shut. I tried the handle, but it wouldn't budge. "Ron!" I shouted, pounding on the door. "This isn't funny! Open the door!" "Mike," Jenny's voice came out strangled. "The hallway—" I turned and froze. What had been a simple entryway with stairs and 2 room openings had changed. The hallway now stretched impossibly long, with dozens of identical doors lining both sides, vanishing into darkness beyond the reach of my flashlight beam. "That's not possible," I breathed, backing up against the basement door. "That's not—" Jenny clutched my arm, her nails digging into my skin. "What's happening? Where's Ron?" I shook my head, unable to process what I was seeing. The farmhouse that shouldn't exist had transformed into something even more impossible, a labyrinth of endless corridors and doors that defied the physical dimensions of the building we'd entered. "We need to get out," I managed, pulling Jenny toward where the front door should have been. But it was gone, replaced by smooth wall and faded wallpaper. No windows, no exit, just the endless hallway stretching before us with its parade of identical doors. The house had us trapped. "Jenny, we have to find a way out," I said, gripping her hand tighter as we stared down the impossibly elongated hallway. The farmhouse that shouldn't exist had transformed into something even more nightmarish, a labyrinth that defied all physical laws. Jenny's breathing quickened beside me. "The front door. Let's try to get back to the entrance." We turned away from the bizarre hallway extension and hurried back toward where the front door should have been. But the entryway had vanished, replaced by an unfamiliar living room we hadn't seen before. Every window showed only an impenetrable blackness, as if night had fallen instantly or the house had been swallowed by void. "This is impossible," I muttered, trying to maintain my grip on reality. "There has to be a way out." We moved through the ground floor methodically, testing every door we found. Some refused to budge, locked by mechanisms that made no sound when I rattled the handles. Others swung open easily only to reveal solid brick walls behind them, as if the doors had been installed as some sick joke. "The windows," Jenny suggested, her voice strained but determined. She approached the nearest one and tried to lift the sash. It moved about an inch before stopping abruptly. Through the narrow gap came no breeze, no sound. Nothing but that absolute darkness. I tried another window in what appeared to be a study. The glass felt unnaturally cold against my fingertips, and when I peered out, I couldn't see the clearing, trees, or even sky. Just that same, consuming emptiness. "It's like the house exists in its own pocket of reality," I said, immediately regretting the words when I saw Jenny's expression tighten with fear. "Don't say that," she whispered. "There has to be a rational explanation. There has to be a way out." We circled back to the main hallway, having exhausted every possible exit on the ground floor. The transformed corridor stretched before us, dozens of identical doors extending far beyond what the physical dimensions of the farmhouse should allow. "Upstairs is our only option now," I said, hating every word. "Maybe we can find Ron and figure this out together." Jenny squeezed my hand. "If the walls of reality are bending, at least we're together for it." I managed a grim smile as we ascended the creaking stairs. At the top, The impossible hallway extended in both directions, doors lining each wall at regular intervals. The corridor seemed to stretch to infinity, growing dimmer with distance until it faded into darkness. "We should check each room," Jenny said. "Ron has to be in one of them." "Let's be methodical about this. Start with this side, work our way down." I approached the first door on our right and turned the ornate brass knob. The room contained nothing but antique dolls, dozens of them, arranged on shelves, chairs, and the small bed in the corner. Porcelain faces with painted smiles and glass eyes that should have been fixed forward. But as the door opened fully, every single doll's head rotated in perfect unison to face us, their painted eyes seeming to follow our movements. "Jesus," I gasped, pulling the door shut immediately. My heart hammered against my ribs. Jenny's face had gone pale. "What's happening here, Mike?" "I don't know." The admission felt like failure. "But we need to keep looking for Ron." The next door revealed a room that appeared normal at first glance, a simple bedroom with faded wallpaper and an iron bed frame. But when we stepped inside, the temperature dropped dramatically, our breath forming visible clouds in the suddenly frigid air. "Let's try another one," Jenny suggested, backing out quickly. The third door required more force to open. Inside was a room containing nothing but a single wooden chair facing the wall. Dark stains spread across the floorboards beneath it, dried blood that had soaked deep into the wood grain, radiating outward in a grotesque pattern. The wall the chair faced was blank except for a single word scratched into the plaster. "Watch." "Don't go in there," Jenny warned, pulling at my sleeve. I didn't need convincing. We moved to the next door. Each room revealed a new horror. One contained thousands of tiny mirrors covering every inch of wall space, each reflecting a slightly different version of ourselves. Some with missing eyes, others with unnaturally wide smiles. Another appeared to be a child's bedroom where all the stuffed animals had been meticulously dissected, their cotton innards arranged in precise patterns on the floor. Time seemed to distort as we progressed down the hallway. My watch showed we'd been exploring for over 2 hours, but it felt both longer and shorter simultaneously. The light remained consistent, that same dim, sourceless illumination that cast everything in a sickly yellow hue. "Mike, look at this one," Jenny called from a door across the hall. I joined her at the threshold of what appeared to be a sitting room. Every inch of wall space was covered with framed family photographs, hundreds of them spanning different eras from sepia-toned portraits to modern color snapshots. But every single face had been methodically scratched out, leaving ragged holes where eyes, noses, and mouths should have been. "Who would do this?" Jenny whispered, stepping cautiously into the room. I followed, drawn to a particular photograph near the center of the display. The frame was more ornate than the others, gold-leafed and intricate. The photograph showed 4 people standing in front of a farmhouse, this farmhouse. Despite the scratched-out faces, something about their postures seemed hauntingly familiar. "Jenny," I began, but was interrupted by a sound that froze my blood. "Help me!" Ron's voice echoed through the house, seeming to come from everywhere at once. "Please, somebody help me!" Jenny grabbed my arm. "That's Ron! We have to find him!" We rushed back into the hallway, trying to determine the direction of his voice. It came again, more desperate this time. "Mike! Jenny! Help me, please!" "This way," I said, pulling Jenny toward what seemed like the source. We ran past more doors, the hallway stretching implausibly. The voice continued calling, growing more frantic, more pained with each repetition. We stopped at a junction where the hallway split into 3 identical corridors. Ron's voice echoed from all of them. "Which way?" Jenny's eyes darted between the options. A door at the end of the rightmost hallway creaked open slightly as if inviting us forward. "There," I pointed, though every instinct screamed at me to run in the opposite direction. We approached the door cautiously. Ron's voice had fallen silent. The only sound was our footsteps on the wooden floor and our increasingly rapid breathing. As we reached the door, I hesitated, hand hovering over the knob. We have to, Jenny whispered, though her face showed the same dread I felt. I nodded and pushed the door open. The stench hit us first, a nauseating combination of burning flesh and chemical preservation that made my stomach lurch violently. The room was larger than any we'd encountered, with a high ceiling from which hung several bodies. They were suspended by hooks through their shoulders, their skin peeling away in long strips that never quite detached. Despite the obvious mutilation, the bodies moved, twitching and writhing. Most horrifying of all, their exposed flesh smoldered with a slow, consuming fire that never seemed to burn out. Jenny retched beside me, turning away from the nightmarish scene. I would have done the same if not for what I spotted among the suspended forms, a familiar figure with long, dark hair arranged in a neat braid. Lisa. The name left my lips before I could stop it. The figure's head turned at the sound, revealing Lisa's face, her amber eyes open and aware, silently pleading for help. But something was wrong about her movements, as if her skin was being operated by something that didn't quite understand how human bodies worked. "That's not Lisa," Jenny gasped, pulling at my arm. "Mike, we need to get out now." The room seemed to respond to her words. The door behind us slammed shut and vanished, the wall sealing seamlessly as if there had never been an entrance. The suspended bodies began to sway more violently, their silent burning accelerating. "There." Jenny pointed to a window on the far wall, the first window we'd seen that showed actual daylight beyond. "We can break through it." We ran across the room, dodging the swinging, burning forms overhead. I grabbed a heavy brass candlestick from a side table and smashed it against the glass. The window shattered outward, revealing the clearing and forest beyond. 2 stories below us, the ground seemed impossibly far away, but it was our only option. "You first," I told Jenny, helping her onto the windowsill. She balanced precariously, glass shards threatening to cut through her hiking boots. Behind us, the room began to change. The walls pulsed like something breathing, and the floor rippled in waves that threatened to knock us off our feet. The Lisa thing twisted in its suspension, its mouth opening wider than any human mouth should be able to. "Jump!" I shouted as Jenny hesitated. "I'm right behind you." She nodded and pushed off from the windowsill. As I scrambled to follow her, the entire house seemed to shift and distort around me. The window frame contracted suddenly, nearly crushing my shoulders as I tried to squeeze through. I glimpsed Jenny below, already rolling to absorb the impact of her landing. My fingers gripped the outer edge of the sill as I struggled to pull myself through the narrowing opening. The house groaned around me, the sound impossibly deep and almost sentient. I felt the windowsill twist beneath my hands, the wood grain flowing like liquid. "Mike!" Jenny screamed from below. I pushed with everything I had, forcing my body through the constricting space. For a moment I thought I'd make it, then my grip slipped. The sensation of falling hit me with sickening clarity. I saw Jenny's horrified face looking up at me, her scream cutting through the air as I plummeted. The ground rushed toward me with terrible finality. I had just enough time to think of Jenny, to hope she would run, and then blackness consumed everything. Pain erupted through my body as consciousness slammed back into me. My eyes snapped open to gray sky and forest canopy spinning in dizzying circles. Every inch of me throbbed, my back, my shoulders, my head. The taste of copper filled my mouth. Someone was shaking me, hands gripping my shoulders with desperate intensity. "Mike! Mike! Wake up! Please!" Lisa's face swam into focus above me, her features contorted with panic. Blood trickled from a gash on her forehead, and her once neat braid had come completely undone, hair hanging in wild tangles around her scratched face. Her jacket was torn at the shoulder, exposing raw, bleeding skin beneath. "Jenny," I croaked, the name tumbling from my lips before I could process anything else. "Where's Jenny?" "We have to go," Lisa said, ignoring my question. Her eyes kept darting toward something behind me. "We have to go right now." I rolled my head to follow her gaze and felt my stomach lurch. The farmhouse still stood there, weathered clapboards somehow looking more decrepit in the late afternoon light. Reality crashed back over me. The impossibly long hallways, the doors that led nowhere, the horrific room of suspended burning bodies, Jenny jumping from the window ahead of me, my fall. Jenny jumped too. I struggled to sit up, pain shooting through my ribs. She was right here. Nobody was here when I found you. Lisa grabbed my arm, trying to pull me to my feet. Please, Mike, we can't stay here. I staggered upright, the world tilting dangerously. My right ankle screamed in protest when I put weight on it. How had I survived that fall without breaking my neck? How are you even here? I asked, leaning against Lisa for support. You stayed at camp. I followed you. Something felt wrong. Her words came in quick, breathless bursts as she dragged me away from the farmhouse. I watched you all go in, and then the building just changed, started twisting. I knew I had to get you out. We stumbled through the underbrush, Lisa half carrying me despite her smaller frame. I kept looking back, expecting the farmhouse to be pursuing us somehow, but it remained stationary in its clearing, windows like dead eyes watching our retreat. Where's Jenny? I asked again, my voice stronger. Lisa, where's my wife? I don't know. She pulled me forward with surprising strength. I only found you. You were just lying there, but the house, Mike, that place is wrong. I saw inside through a window, corridors that kept changing, rooms appearing and disappearing. I tried to plant my feet to stop our retreat. We have to go back. Jenny's still in there. You don't understand. Lisa's voice cracked. Her amber eyes were wide with genuine terror. I saw things in there, things wearing people's faces, moving wrong, like they were trying to remember how to be human. The memory of Lisa's face among the suspended burning bodies flashed through my mind, the way her skin had moved incorrectly, like something else was inside it. You were in there, I said slowly. I saw you. Her face went blank for a moment before fear replaced it again. That wasn't me. That's what I'm trying to tell you. They look like people, but they're not. My head throbbed. Nothing made sense. Ron, we need to get back to camp, Lisa interrupted, resuming her pull on my arm. Maybe they're already there. The hope, thin as it was, gave me enough strength to keep moving. We picked our way through the forest, following a route that seemed much shorter than the one Ron had led us on. Despite my injured ankle, we moved quickly, driven by shared desperation. When the trees finally thinned to reveal our campsite, fresh horror awaited us. The clearing had been ravaged, tents slashed open, supplies scattered across the ground. Our carefully organized camp looked like it had been hit by a whirlwind of violence. Jesus, I whispered, limping forward to survey the destruction. My tent lay in tatters, the expensive fabric shredded as if by claws. Our backpacks had been gutted, contents spilled across the dirt. Food containers had been smashed open, their contents seemingly sampled and discarded. What happened here? Lisa's voice was barely audible as she knelt beside the remains of her tent. I picked through the wreckage of our supplies, moving on autopilot. My brain couldn't process everything at once, Jenny missing, the impossible farmhouse, this destruction. I focused on the immediate problem, searching for anything useful. Under a torn section of my tent, I found my backpack. The main compartment had been ripped open, but the hidden pocket in the lining remained intact. I slipped my fingers inside and felt immediate relief when they closed around cool metal. My hunting knife and the small emergency pistol I always packed for backwoods trips. Did you find anything? Lisa asked, looking up from where she was sorting through her own belongings. I slipped the knife into my belt and checked the pistol, a compact 9mm with a full magazine. I tucked it into my jacket pocket, not wanting to alarm Lisa further. Just some supplies, I said. Anything of Ron's or Jenny's? She shook her head. Nothing useful. Their backpacks are empty. The sun was beginning its descent toward the horizon, casting long shadows through the trees. Twilight would be upon us soon, and the thought of being in these woods after dark sent a fresh wave of dread through me. "We need to find them," I said, retrieving a flashlight from the debris, "before it gets dark." Lisa nodded, gathering herself. "Which way?" I had no idea. The forest stretched in every direction, dense and increasingly shadowed. Jenny could be anywhere, still trapped in that impossible house, wandering lost through the trees, or... I couldn't finish the thought. "We'll circle outward from here," I decided. "Call their names. Maybe they'll hear us." We moved through the forest together, our voices growing hoarse as we called for Jenny and Ron. The woods seemed to absorb our shouts, muffling them to nothing within yards. My ankle throbbed with each step, but the pain kept me focused, kept the panic at bay. Lisa stayed close to me, flinching at every snapping twig or rustling leaf. She kept glancing over her shoulder, as if expecting to see something following us. "Tell me what you saw in the house," I said during a brief rest, needing to understand what we were dealing with. Her hands trembled as she hugged herself. It was like reality was breaking. Hallways that shouldn't fit in that building, doors that opened to walls, and these things. They looked human but moved wrong, like puppets. She swallowed hard. "I saw one that looked like Ron, but its movements were jerky, mechanical. When it turned and saw me watching, its face just opened." "Opened how?" "Like it was unfolding," she whispered. "More teeth than should fit in a human mouth. Eyes where there shouldn't be eyes." The description matched nothing I'd seen inside, yet resonated with the same impossible wrongness. Whatever that farmhouse was, it seemed to show different horrors to different people. Before I could ask more, a sound cut through the forest, sharp, unmistakable. A gunshot. My hand went instinctively to the pistol in my pocket, but it was still there. "That came from over there." Lisa pointed east, already moving. We broke into a run, my injured ankle forgotten as adrenaline flooded my system. The sound had been close, maybe a quarter-mile through the trees. We crashed through underbrush, ducked low branches, scrambled over fallen logs. The trees suddenly opened into a small clearing bathed in the dying light of sunset. The scene before us froze me in place. Ron lay sprawled on his back, a dark stain spreading across his chest. Blood pooled beneath him, soaking into the forest floor. His eyes stared sightlessly at the darkening sky. And kneeling beside him, her back to us, was Jenny. Her shoulders hunched forward, her hair matted with what looked like dried blood. In her right hand, she clutched what I immediately recognized as my pistol. "Ron!" Lisa's scream shattered the silence. She rushed forward, dropping to her knees beside his body. "No, no, no!" Jenny's head snapped up at the sound. She turned toward us, the gun still gripped in her hand. When our eyes met, there was no recognition in her gaze, only raw, animal fear. Her face was scratched and bruised, dirt and blood smeared across her cheek. "Jenny," I stepped forward, hands raised. "It's me, it's Mike." She scrambled backward, raising the gun with both hands. The barrel trembled visibly. "Don't come any closer," she warned, her voice hoarse and broken. "You're not my husband." The words hit me like a physical blow. I stopped, keeping my hands where she could see them. "Jenny, it's me. I fell from the window of that farmhouse. Lisa found me. We've been looking for you." Her eyes darted from me to Lisa, who was sobbing over Ron's motionless form. Something like recognition flickered in her expression for an instant, then vanished behind terror. "My husband would know," she said, the gun still pointed at my chest. "He would know what they really are." Who really is?" I kept my voice gentle, fearing any sudden movement would make her pull the trigger. "Jenny, please, tell me what happened." She shook her head, tears cutting clean tracks through the grime on her face. They look like us, talk like us, but they're not us. They get everything almost right, but they can't fake what really matters. Lisa looked up from Ron's body, her face streaked with tears and blood. Who, Jenny? Who are you talking about? Jenny's gaze settled on Lisa with such hatred that I almost didn't recognize my wife. Ask her what she did to Ron. Ask her what they're planning to do to all of us. The clearing grew darker as the sun dipped below the tree line. In the gathering shadows, Jenny's features seemed to sharpen, her familiar face transformed by terror and conviction. The gun in her hands never wavered as she kept it trained on me, refusing to accept that I was truly her husband. And in the deepening twilight, with Ron's body cooling on the ground between us, I began to wonder if she might be right to doubt. After what I'd seen in that farmhouse, doors that led nowhere, rooms that couldn't exist, Lisa's face among the burning suspended bodies, could I really be sure of anything anymore, even myself? Stay back, Jenny warned, the gun wavering in her shaking hands. I know what you really are. The dying light cast long shadows across the clearing, making her face even more unrecognizable beneath the streaks of dirt and blood. Her eyes, those warm green eyes that had first drawn me to her across a crowded university lecture hall, now burned with a feverish intensity I'd never seen before. Jenny, please. I kept my hands raised, taking one careful step forward. It's me. It's really me. Don't move. Her finger tightened on the trigger. They get almost everything right, but they miss what matters. Behind her, Lisa knelt beside Ron's body, her sobs punctuating the eerie stillness of the forest. His blood had soaked into the ground beneath him, turning the earth dark and slick in the fading light. Ask me something, I said, inspiration striking. Something only I would know. Something only your real husband would know. Jenny's eyes narrowed, the gun still aimed at my chest. The entities have access to memories. They can pull information. Not everything. I took another cautious step. Not the things that live only between us. She hesitated, and I seized the moment. Our first date. The restaurant caught fire. The words tumbled out of me. Not a big fire, just the kitchen, but they evacuated everyone. We ended up eating gas station sandwiches on that park bench by the river. You were wearing that blue dress with the tiny flowers, and you laughed when I tried to make it fancy by stealing napkins from the gas station bathroom. Something flickered in her eyes. Not recognition yet, but a wavering of certainty. Our wedding day, I continued, my voice growing more urgent. The best man, my cousin David, got drunk and fell into the cake before we could cut it. Your mother was horrified, but you laughed so hard you snorted, and then got embarrassed because your grandmother heard it. A tremor ran through her arms, the gun dipping slightly. The night we found out you were pregnant, before we lost the baby. We stayed up until dawn, making lists of names. You wanted something with meaning, not just something that sounded nice. You cried when I suggested your father's name if it was a boy. Tears welled in Jenny's eyes. The gun lowered further. The scar on your left hip from when you fell off your bike as a kid. How you can't stand the smell of bananas. The way you always sleep with your right hand under your pillow. The fact that you secretly watch cooking shows but never actually cook. Mike, her voice cracked, the gun now pointed at the ground. It's me, Jenny. I swear it's me. The last thing you said to me before I jumped from that window. Her words came as a challenge, a final test. I thought back to that terrible moment, her balanced on the windowsill, the room distorting around us. I said, jump, I'm right behind you. The gun clattered to the forest floor. Mike! Relief flooded through me as recognition dawned in her eyes. I rushed forward as her knees buckled, catching her before she hit the ground. Only then did I feel the wetness seeping through her jacket. Not just dirt and forest grime, but blood. Far too much blood. You're hurt, I gasped, lowering her gently. Why didn't you say something? She grimaced as I eased her onto her back. Wasn't sure it was really you. I unzipped her jacket with shaking hands and pulled up the blood-soaked shirt beneath. A deep gash ran across her side, still seeping dark blood. She must have been bleeding the entire time she held me at gunpoint. "Lisa," I called over my shoulder. "She's hurt. We need the first aid kit." There was no response. I looked back to where Lisa had been kneeling over Ron's body, but she was gone. In the chaos of my reunion with Jenny, I hadn't noticed her disappear. "Lisa?" I scanned the darkening clearing, seeing no sign of her. "Not Lisa," Jenny whispered, clutching my arm. "Never Lisa." I tore off my outer shirt and pressed it against her wound, trying to stop the bleeding. "What happened to you? Where were you after we got separated in the house?" Jenny's breathing was shallow, her face growing paler by the second. "After I jumped, I landed wrong. My ankle couldn't walk well. I called for you, but you weren't there." "I fell too," I explained, maintaining pressure on her wound. "I must have been knocked out. Lisa found me." Jenny's eyes widened with alarm. "Not Lisa," she repeated more forcefully. "Listen to me, Mike. After I jumped, I tried to find you. Then I saw you walking toward me from the other side of the clearing." "That wasn't me," I said, remembering Lisa's warnings about things wearing human faces. "I know that now." Jenny winced as I pressed harder on her wound. "It looked exactly like you, moved like you, even smelled like you. But when it touched me, I knew. There was something wrong in its eyes, empty, like looking into a well that never ends." I glanced around the clearing again, suddenly aware of how exposed we were. The forest had grown dark, shadows deepening between the trees. "We need to get you out of here." "No time," she gasped. "Listen." It led me back into the house. Different rooms this time. I saw Lisa. The real Lisa. Something wearing Lisa's skin. Her fingers dug into my arm. There was a room with metal tables, like a laboratory, but wrong. Older than it should be. Ancient tools next to modern equipment. Lisa, or what looked like Lisa, was strapped to one of the tables. There were figures around her, shadowy, tall. They were taking her apart, Mike. Methodically, cutting and peeling, and... She broke off, shuddering. I stroked her hair, trying to comfort her despite my growing horror. "You don't have to..." "They weren't just dissecting her," Jenny continued, her voice growing fainter. "They were studying how to be her, how to move like her, speak like her. I watched them practicing her mannerisms. They got frustrated when they couldn't get her laugh right." The memory of Lisa appearing at our camp that afternoon flashed through my mind. Her familiar face, her concern, the way she'd helped me search for Jenny. Had that really been Lisa, or something wearing her skin, still learning how to move in it? "I ran," Jenny continued. "Got lost in the house. Those endless hallways, doors that led nowhere. I found what I thought was Lisa hiding in a closet. She seemed terrified, said she'd followed us and seen everything. We escaped together through a basement window I broke. We made it back toward camp, but then we ran into Ron." Jenny coughed, a wet sound that brought a trickle of blood to the corner of her mouth. I wiped it away gently, fighting to keep my composure. "It wasn't Ron," she whispered. "It looked like him. But the way it moved, like its joints weren't quite right. Lisa didn't notice, but I did. When it realized I knew. It attacked us. I had found your gun in the wreckage of our camp. I shot it, but the Lisa thing panicked, pushed me. I fell on something sharp, a broken tent pole, I think." "And the real Lisa?" I asked, though I feared I already knew the answer. "There is no real Lisa anymore," Jenny's voice broke. "The thing I escaped with, it wasn't her either. I realized too late. The way it reacted when I shot Ron, no grief, just calculation. It stabbed me and ran." I looked down at my blood-soaked hands pressing against her wound. Despite my efforts, the bleeding hadn't slowed. Her skin had taken on a gray pallor, her breathing becoming more labored. "They've lived in these woods forever," she gasped. "Old things, patient things. They take our skins, our memories, our lives, but they can't fake what really matters, the connections, the emotional truth of being human." "We need to get you to a hospital," I said desperately, knowing even as I spoke that it was too late. The nearest road was miles away, and night had fully descended on the forest. Jenny's hand found mine, her fingers ice cold. "They could be anyone now, Mike. Anyone you meet. They'll look right, sound right, but they'll miss the small things. Don't talk," I begged, tears blurring my vision. "Save your strength. Promise me you'll tell people," she whispered, her grip weakening, "about what's in these woods, about what they do." "I promise," I choked out, cradling her against my chest. "I love you," she murmured, so faintly I barely heard her. "Remember, they can't fake love. That's how you'll know." Her body went slack in my arms, the final word fading on her lips. I pulled her closer, burying my face in her hair as sobs tore through me. The forest around us remained unnaturally silent, as if holding its breath in witness. I don't know how long I held her, rocking back and forth in the darkness. The moon rose, casting pale light through the canopy above. My mind replayed Jenny's final words over and over. They could be anyone now. Eventually, I remembered Lisa's disappearance. I gently laid Jenny down and retrieved the gun from where it had fallen. With shaking hands, I checked the magazine. 3 bullets remaining. "Lisa," I called out, scanning the darkness beyond our clearing. "Where are you?" Only silence answered me, but I could feel eyes watching from the shadows. I moved back to Jenny's body, positioning myself beside her. I would not leave her alone in this place, not with those things lurking in the dark. I would keep vigil until morning, and then find a way to carry her out of these cursed woods. But as the long night stretched before me, one thought circled endlessly in my mind. If what Jenny said was true, then the thing I'd been hiking with all afternoon, the Lisa who had found me after my fall, had never been Lisa at all. I waited for dawn with my wife's body in my arms and my gun trained on the darkness, listening for movement in the trees, wondering what familiar faces might emerge from the shadows wearing expressions that were almost, but not quite, right. I don't remember the rangers finding me. One moment I was alone in the darkness with Jenny's cold body in my arms. The next there were voices cutting through the fog of my grief, flashlight beams crisscrossing the clearing. Hands tried to separate me from her. I fought them. "Sir, you need to let go, sir. We're here to help." I couldn't form words to explain why letting go was impossible. If I released her, they might take her shape, steal her form like they'd taken Lisa's. The gun was still clutched in my right hand, though I had no memory of raising it toward the ranger who approached. Someone tackled me from behind. The world flipped and spun, earth and sky trading places as I was pressed face first into the dirt. The gun was wrenched from my fingers. "Got his weapon," a voice called out. "Secure?" "Secure. Got him." Cold metal encircled my wrists. Handcuffs. I stopped struggling only when I realized I couldn't see Jenny anymore. "Where is she?" My voice was a rasp, barely recognizable. "The female victim is being transported," someone answered. They helped me to my feet. 2 rangers in olive uniforms held my arms as they steered me through the woods. I twisted to look back, catching a glimpse of a black body bag being zipped closed over Jenny's face. Another team worked over Ron's body, collecting evidence, taking photographs. The clearing now buzzed with activity, rangers, police, paramedics cataloging a tragedy they couldn't possibly understand. "Where's Lisa?" I asked, as they guided me along a trail I didn't recognize. "Did you find Lisa?" They exchanged glances over my head. "We're conducting a thorough search," one finally answered. They never found her, not during the initial sweep. not during the 3 days of intensive searching that followed. Lisa disappeared completely, leaving behind only the blood-stained shreds of her tent and a void in the official report that investigators seemed determined to fill with mundane explanations. The questioning began at a ranger station, continued at the sheriff's department, and eventually migrated to a conference room at Northwest Regional Hospital after doctors insisted I needed medical attention. My body was a catalog of injuries: sprained ankle, 3 cracked ribs, mild concussion, severe dehydration, and dozens of cuts and bruises. Physical evidence of the nightmare, but not enough to convince anyone of the truth. "Tell us again about this farmhouse," Detective Ramirez said. She was the 3rd detective to interview me, but the first to show genuine interest rather than barely concealed skepticism. 2 stories, weathered clapboard siding, collapsed barn behind it. I recited the details mechanically, having repeated them countless times. But inside it changed. Corridors that shouldn't fit, rooms that kept shifting. "And this was approximately how far from your campsite?" Ron said a mile, but it took us hours to reach it. She made a note on her pad. "We've conducted thorough searches using the coordinates from your GPS device. There are no structures in that area of Blackwood Forest. No foundations, no ruins, nothing to suggest a building ever stood there. It was there." My voice cracked. We all saw it. 2 days after they found me, they located our campsite. Everything was exactly as Jenny had described. Equipment slashed and scattered. Supplies destroyed. They found no fingerprints except our own. No footprints that couldn't be attributed to our group. No evidence of anyone or anything else having been there. The official report, which I wasn't shown until weeks later, listed Ron's death as a hunting accident, despite the absence of any hunting equipment among our supplies. Jenny's death was attributed to injuries sustained in a fall, exacerbated by delayed medical attention. My account of impossible architecture and entities wearing human skins was relegated to a brief section titled "Witness Statement Inconsistencies." "Trauma can affect memory formation," Dr. Littman explained during my psychological evaluation. He was a court-appointed psychiatrist with kind eyes and a voice that never rose above a gentle murmur. "Your mind is trying to make sense of a chaotic, tragic event." "I know what I saw." "Of course you believe that." He nodded sympathetically. "But consider the alternative, which is more likely, that you encountered supernatural entities capable of altering reality and mimicking human appearance, or that you experienced a stress-induced break from reality after witnessing a tragic accident. When I refused to accept their version of events, refused to acknowledge that what we'd experienced was anything other than a camping trip gone horribly wrong, they transferred me to Pinewood Psychiatric Facility for observation and recovery. 3 weeks of white walls, group therapy, and medications that dulled the edges of my thoughts but couldn't erase what I knew to be true. 3 weeks of pretending to accept their reality until they finally deemed me stable enough for release into my sister's care. Elaine's apartment in Seattle became my halfway house. She converted her office into a bedroom, took 6 weeks of family leave, and watched me with the careful attention of someone monitoring a bomb that might detonate at any moment. "The doctors said you need to focus on rebuilding," she told me over breakfast one morning, sliding a pamphlet across the table. "Grief counseling. They said not to let you dwell on the other stuff." I stared at the pamphlet without touching it. "They think I'm crazy." "No one thinks that." Her expression betrayed her words. "They think you experienced something traumatic, and your mind is protecting itself." I didn't argue. Arguing only reinforced their certainty that I was unstable. Instead, I pretended to heal. I attended the grief counseling sessions. I took the prescribed medications, at least when anyone was watching. I spoke about Jenny and Ron in past tense, allowing my voice to crack appropriately, and never mentioned the farmhouse or the things wearing human faces. Slowly, Elaine's vigilance eased. She returned to work. She stopped checking whether I'd swallowed my pills. She began mentioning future plans. Perhaps I'd like to return to consulting work or maybe try teaching, life trying to reassert its normal rhythms. I waited until she believed in my recovery before beginning my research in earnest. The local library became my sanctuary. I spent hours poring over historical records of Blackwood Forest, printing articles about missing hikers, campers who disappeared without trace, search parties that found abandoned campsites with equipment left behind. Patterns emerged across decades, clusters of disappearances separated by long periods of quiet, always in the same general area, always without explanation. When I'd exhausted the library's resources, I expanded my search online, creating detailed spreadsheets, tracking dates, locations, circumstances. I overlaid these data points onto topographical maps, identifying hotspots where the boundaries between worlds seemed thinnest. 6 months after they found me holding Jenny's body, I returned to Blackwood Forest. I told Elaine I was visiting college friends in Portland. The lie came easily, wrapped in the trappings of recovery. Wasn't it healthy that I was reconnecting with old friends? She seemed relieved, even helped me pack, suggesting music for the drive down. I waited until she left for work before redirecting my route eastward toward the mountains and the forest that had claimed everything I loved. The ranger station near the trailhead was staffed by a young man who hadn't been part of the search party that found me. He barely glanced at the day hiking permit I filled out, providing a fake name and car model. His indifference was a blessing. Nobody would know I was here until I wanted them to. I followed the familiar trail, my backpack heavier now with more than camping supplies. A professional GPS unit, a high-resolution camera with infrared capabilities, motion sensors I'd purchased from a hunting supply store, an audio recorder, tools to capture evidence no one could dismiss as hallucination or trauma response. Using coordinates I'd meticulously calculated from my memories and the search party's reports, I navigated to where the farmhouse should have stood. What I found instead was a perfect clearing, conspicuously empty of trees or brush. A ring of pale mushrooms encircled the area, their caps glistening with dew that hadn't fallen elsewhere in the forest. I photographed everything, the clearing's dimensions, the mushroom ring, the way shadows seemed to hesitate before crossing certain boundaries. I set up the motion sensors at the perimeter and retreated to a concealed position to wait. Hours passed. The forest darkened around me. Animal sounds, birds, squirrels, the occasional larger rustling, faded with the light until only the wind through pine needles remained. My recorded time-lapse showed nothing entering or leaving the clearing. When I finally approached the mushroom ring again, something had changed. The earth within the circle looked freshly disturbed, as if something had pushed up from beneath only to subside again. I collected samples of soil and several mushrooms, storing them carefully in sealed containers. I spent 3 days in Blackwood Forest, exploring and documenting. I found no trace of the farmhouse, but discovered 7 similar clearings with fungal growth patterns, forming perfect circles. Near one, I uncovered small animal bones arranged in geometric patterns too precise to be natural. After returning to Seattle, I expanded my research to the County Historical Society. Elderly volunteers eyed me warily as I requested archive access, perhaps sensing my desperation beneath the veneer of casual academic interest. Their caution dissolved when I invented a dissertation topic on regional folklore and its relationship to landscape. Indigenous tribes avoided certain areas of Blackwood Forest, Ms. Harker explained, setting a box of yellowed documents before me. Her arthritic fingers lingered on the lid. The Nooksack people called it the place of hollow people. Other tribes had similar names, places where skinwalkers or spirit thieves dwelled. I photographed every document, every map, every mention of strange occurrences. Most compelling was a collection of yellowed newspaper clippings from the 1880s. The Wilkinson family, father, mother, 2 children, and a cousin visiting from Boston, had vanished from their isolated farmhouse in 1887. Neighbors reported seeing lights in the abandoned building weeks after the family's disappearance. When locals finally investigated, they found the house empty, but described unnatural configurations of rooms and corridors that led nowhere. They burned the house to the ground 2 days later. The article didn't explain their reasoning. Over subsequent months, I documented dozens of similar cases. Disappearances attributed to animal attacks, hikers never found, campers who vanished leaving equipment behind, reports of strange behaviors from people who returned from the forest only to disappear again days later. "You're developing an unhealthy obsession," Elaine said one evening, standing in the doorway of my bedroom. I hadn't heard her enter. She stared at the wall where I'd pinned maps and timelines and photographs connected by red string. "This isn't healing, Mike." "I'm not trying to heal," I admitted. "I'm trying to understand." The doctors warned this might happen, fixation as a response to grief. I couldn't explain that this wasn't fixation, it was investigation. The alternative was accepting the lies they'd constructed to explain away what happened to Jenny and Ron and Lisa. Accepting that reality made sense, that the world operated according to comprehensible rules, that there weren't ancient things living in forgotten places, things that could wear human faces and mimic human movements, but couldn't quite grasp what made us truly ourselves. 2 weeks later, I saw Lisa. It happened at a coffee shop 6 blocks from Elaine's apartment. I was reviewing historical weather patterns correlating with disappearances when movement at the counter caught my attention. A woman with her back to me, ordering a drink. Something in her posture, the way she tilted her head when the barista asked a question, tugged at my memory. When she turned, I dropped my coffee, sending ceramic shards and hot liquid across the floor. Lisa Cortez Blackwell looked directly at me, her amber eyes showing no recognition, no surprise. She collected her drink and walked out while I sat frozen, unable to process what I'd seen. I reported the sighting to Detective Ramirez the next day. She hadn't officially closed the case, but had been reassigned months ago. She agreed to meet me as a professional courtesy, listening patiently as I described the encounter. "Mr. Thornwood," she said finally, closing her notebook without writing anything. "I understand grief can manifest in unexpected ways, but you need to consider the possibility that you're seeing similarities in strangers because you want to find closure. It was her. Exact same appearance as when she disappeared. No aging, no changes, nothing. We've investigated every lead. Ms. Cortez Blackwell hasn't used her credit cards, accessed her bank accounts, or contacted any known associates since the incident. Because it's not her," I insisted. "It's something wearing her face, like Jenny tried to warn me." The detective's expression shifted from professional sympathy to concern. "Have you been continuing your psychiatric treatment?" "This isn't mental illness." I saw her. "I think you should consider speaking with Dr. Littman again." She wrote something on a business card and slid it across the table. "I've noted his direct number. Please call him today." I took the card and left, knowing I'd lost my last connection to official channels. The authorities would never help me uncover the truth. They couldn't accept that the boundaries between worlds were thinner than we imagined, that ancient predators moved among us wearing stolen faces, mimicking human behavior while missing the essential humanity beneath. That night, alone in my room, surrounded by maps and documents and theories, I made a decision. If the authorities wouldn't acknowledge the threat, I would document it myself. Create a record so comprehensive, so meticulously researched that no one could dismiss it as the ravings of a traumatized mind. I began organizing my findings chronologically, cross-referencing witness statements with historical accounts and indigenous legends. Patterns emerged with frightening clarity. Cycles of activity, geographical hotspots, methods of operation consistent across centuries. They were ancient and patient, these entities. They had been hunting humans for longer than written history, using impossible places as lures and stolen faces as camouflage. They learned by taking us apart, studying how we moved and spoke and loved, creating imperfect copies that could pass casual inspection but failed under close scrutiny. And they were spreading. They were.